Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, very glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, the last Three Martini Lunch podcast where Joe Biden will be president of the United States. By the time we talk to you on Monday, that will no longer be the case. But Jim, we'll get to that a little bit later, a little bit more on Joe Biden and our crazy martini. We're also going to talk about a Supreme Court decision on TikTok, as well as how the incoming president is approaching that issue, a little bit different than he was just a few months ago. But we start with the U.S. Senate. Of course, we just swore in, for the most part, a brand new U.S. Senate on January 3rd. But we've also got a couple of vacancies to fill. One is in Ohio, where JD Vance, of course, is going to be vice president. He actually resigned last week, and we're finally going to get a replacement from Mike DeWine announced today. So we've been down one Republican senator in the U.S. Senate for the past week. But in Florida, Marco Rubio is still the sitting senator, but he probably won't be for long. By all accounts, his confirmation hearing went fine. He'll probably get easily confirmed as soon as Trump becomes president. And so Florida's going to need a new senator. There had been some chatter about Laura Trump. She took her name out of the running. There are a few House members that wanted in, but you can't have another House vacancy. And so then you're looking at state officials, and that's exactly what we got yesterday when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis selected Attorney General Ashley Moody to replace Marco Rubio in the U.S. Senate. And in addition to naming her, explains that if you like what Ron DeSantis has done in Florida, Ashley Moody's been along for the ride every step of the way.
Your battle we have had since I have been governor, she has been with us every step of the way. It's not just talk, it's results. And these results are very, very important. And she understands the gravity of the moment. We may not have an opportunity like this in the near future. This is a once in a decade, maybe even once in a generation opportunity in this current Congress is ultimately going to determine whether we do usher in that revival of the American experiment, or is it just going to be status quo, passing the buck, and nothing ever changes?
And so Ashley Moody will be the next U.S. Senator from Florida. Everybody on the right seems happy about this. Pro-lifers, people who want tough law and order, people who want good fiscal accountability. DeSantis even mentioned that. She's a trained accountant. In her own tweet yesterday, Moody says her work in the judiciary, she's a former judge as well, she's going to be looking to confirm judges like Thomas and Alito. So, I mean, Jim, you can't really ask for a whole lot more than that, assuming she follows through, and there's no reason to think she won't.
Yeah, look, when you have a circumstance in which there's a vacancy in the Senate and you're a governor, there are two ways you can go. One is to go with the elder statesman who is not interested in starting a new career in the Senate. You're kind of acknowledging the person's a placeholder, but there's a certain thing to be said for a person who's not running for re-election. They can vote the way they feel fit and not have to worry about making unpopular decisions. Most of the time, though, you want to pick the rising star. You want to pick somebody who potentially could run for a full term and would, have a real great future in that chamber. The scenario you don't want is one where you pick one that, in this particular case, I think the person turned out to be pretty darn good, but then you and the person you pick to run for Senate are both running for president at the same time. And you have to criticize them, as Nikki Haley had with Tim Scott at various points last year, where she talked about how Tim Scott had been a disappointment representing South Carolina in the Senate. And I just kind of think, well, you got to blame the woman who put him there, which, of course, was Nikki Haley. So I don't think that will be a scenario that comes to pass between Ron DeSantis and Attorney General Moody. If they do, that means it's great. That means they're both rising stars, 8 to 12 years down the road. But no, it seems like a really solid pick, and the kind of person who's run for statewide office in Florida twice, gotten elected and reelected by a wide margin. If Moody decides she loves being a senator and wants to keep representing the state, you'd think she'd be a pretty strong candidate and a good bid for re-election. But maybe she'll decide she prefers being an executive and prefers running things. We'll see how things shake out there. But nonetheless, I think it's a very solid pick, and Floridians should be feeling good about that.
Yeah. What do you make of Mike DeWine, who's had since November 6th, at least, to know that he's got to fill this vacancy? JD Vance resigns a week ago, which is pretty typical. It's usually about 10 days before the inauguration that people do this. Obama did it. Biden did it back in 2009 and so forth. And then even after Vance resigns, it takes DeWine a week. Now, I know Trump threw a little bit of a monkey wrench in there, urging him to pick Vivek Ramaswamy. We're recording this before the official announcement. It doesn't look like it will be Vivek. It'll probably be John Husted, but you'd think he'd be more decisive. He's had a lot of time to think about this.
Yeah. So, by the way, listeners, please be patient with us as we record this when it looks like it's going to be Husted. If DeWine comes out and announces, I am nominating Bernie Kosar, the former quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, and everything we say is out of date, we're sorry about that. I don't think it's going to shake out that way. The upshot of that is probably Governor Ramaswamy. That there's a really, Ramaswamy, there was early talk about him being the appointed senator. Apparently, Trump had kind of talked this up, but it sounds like Ramaswamy's thought about it and said, I think I'm more an executive type. I want to be governor. I don't know whether he sees this as a natural stepping stone to the presidency someday, but I will say this: Ramaswamy can drive me absolutely bonkers sometime. There are few people in Republican politics who can be more demagogic and more fast and loose with the facts. Simultaneously, about a year ago, I was in Iowa right before the snowstorm hit, and I was watching him campaign. And the man is a gifted retail politician. He works a rope line. He works a room. He aces it. And I was like, God, if only he'd use his powers for good instead of evil. I'd like to think that as governor of Ohio, he would do that. And so I think, look, considering his financial resources, you have to figure he's, if not the favorite, then a strong candidate to be the next governor of Ohio. And I guess there was some question of whether Husted would win a primary out in Ohio. So maybe this is the right spot for him. He certainly seems happy. Look, your Republican lieutenant governors do not tend to be, they tend to be pretty darn conservative. So we will see. But so look, it looks like the Republican ranks. And by the way, I understand Jim Justice wanted to, get his last dog walk in before he ended his time as governor in West Virginia. I understand JD Vance wanted to resign at a certain point to, for the inauguration process, and he's got to get it to the national title game to watch Ohio State sometime that evening.
Yes.
He's going to have a very busy Monday night, I suspect. I get that. It doesn't sound like this is going to cause that many real headaches for Republicans in terms of their majority, but I hope everybody coordinates. What day are you leaving, and how quickly? And when that happens, you submit the paperwork for resignation. I want your substitute to have their hand on the Bible at that moment. Really, real quick transitions here to move in. Let's not lose any time.
Yeah, like DeSantis was saying, chop, chop. We got a 2-year span here, hopefully 4, but certainly 2, to get some real stuff done here. So Jim Justice was delayed. Justice delayed is justice denied sometimes. But in terms of Jim Justice getting sworn in, the way the calendar worked in West Virginia with his successor getting sworn in after the senators got sworn in on January 3rd, he had to wait because otherwise there'd be like this domino effect of 3 or 4 different governors over the span of a week. So it would have been kind of bizarre. So he took the high road and decided to wait a few days to make that less chaotic. Secondly, I'm curious as to what's up with Vivek because he was all in on Doge, and now all of a sudden Trump was pushing him for Senate. He might run for governor. And if there is a falling out on the Doge front, it's probably over H-1B visas, which I've seen people on Twitter say it's be the first time somebody made a Saved by the Bell commentary, which cost them a significant position in government.
The Screech defense was every bit as bad as the Nixon checkers speech.
Yes, so I guess you never know.
Slater wins again.
You never know which one's going to be the step up in politics or the step down. It's just all a big crapshoot. But anyway, let's talk about something that's not that at all, and that is Oracle. Look, artificial intelligence is here. Even if you think it's overhyped, it's everywhere. Self-driving cars, molecular medicine, and now business efficiency. And if it's not in your industry yet, it is coming, and it's coming fast. But AI needs a lot of speed and computing power. So, how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? Well, it's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI.
OCI is a blazing fast and secure platform for all of your infrastructure, database, and application development needs, plus all your AI and machine learning workloads. OCI costs 50% less for computing and 80% less for networking, so you're saving a pile of money. Thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including Vodafone, Thomson Reuters, and Suno AI.
Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment. Offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/martini. That's oracle.com/martini. All right, Jim, time for our second martini, and this one deals with TikTok. It's kind of up in the air right now. Once upon a time, not that long ago, Donald Trump was among those calling for a ban on TikTok because it's effectively spyware for the Chinese Communist Party. You would think people would largely be opposed to that. And then several months ago, huge bipartisan majorities in both the House and Senate also approved a TikTok ban. Joe Biden signed it. It got challenged at the Supreme Court. And today, as Bill Hemmer of Fox News here reports, we got a verdict on whether that law is constitutional.
This time, we have a ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court on the popular app known as TikTok. The Supreme Court upholds the law that was passed by Congress in a bipartisan manner, signed into law by Joe Biden last April, to find a new buyer within 270 days. The Supreme Court has now ruled that that law stands.
Jim, a ban is a little bit misleading there because the order will be that the Chinese Communist Party or companies affiliated with it can't own the app anymore. And so we'll see what happens with that. Trump has shifted his position on this. He even did so before the election. But as you report in the Morning Jolt today, where you write about this extensively, he's also kind of solidified in his changed position here because he thinks TikTok played a big role in him doing better among the youth vote and ultimately winning the election, which probably did have a factor in some way. So where do we stand on this?
You'll say that the decision came down and was reported at 10:02 Eastern in the morning, Eastern time this morning. At 9:58, the Morning Jolt hit people's email boxes saying that the Supreme Court was likely to uphold the ban. Thanks a lot, guys. If you could have just, gotten a little bit earlier, I would have been able to update it or send it out a little bit later. And it has been edited to do that. But yeah, you look back, House passed it by a wide margin. The Senate passed it by a wide margin. I think it was like 80-some to 18 or something like that. Biden signed it into law, and now it's been upheld with no objections. So it's not like a formal ruling, but it's basically 9-0. Everyone agrees the U.S. government has the right to do this. And for those who say, for the question like what's going to happen, well, it can no longer be sold in the App Store. And I believe, as it was explained to me, you're not able to update it. So your TikTok app that's on your phone will not disappear. By the way, if you're listening to this podcast, you should not have TikTok on your phone. Don't do it. Right. You get the Chinese spyware out of there. Get it now. In fact, what I've heard is you want to take your phone. You want to put it on a cool, flat surface, smash it with a hammer, and that's the best way to ensure the Chinese don't get your data. It's very, very bad, and we're not even getting into the description of it as a strip club for 14-year-olds, right? It's really bad. But the legal ruling is on the fact that an entity controlled by the Chinese Communist Party isn't allowed to own something like this that operates here in America that's collecting data about Americans. And for the past year, the message has been, all right, ByteDance, Chinese company, you got to sell it. You can sell it to an American. You can sell it to anybody who's not deemed a threat, but you're not allowed to own it. Now, by the way, people have been offered billions to ByteDance to this. And ByteDance says we don't want to sell. What does that tell you? It tells you that the value of the app to the Chinese government is that it's either collecting data on Americans or it's a propaganda tool. Right. So this, but look at all these cool dances we could do to help Hamas and all that stuff. No, in the end, the whole point of this is to poison the minds of Americans and collect all of their personal data. And you love during the hearing was one particular justice who said, well, if you're recording all this data, and it's being used by young people and teenagers and stuff like that, could this be used later in their life to harm their careers? That question coming from Brett Kavanaugh, who probably has a real good concern about things you do in your teenage years being brought up to try to prevent you or hurt your carear later on in life. I can understand why that would resonate with him. So my sense is that if the ban goes through, there's no reason, there's no 11th hour appeal. They've now lost. Your app stops updating and it starts to get glitchy. And eventually, it's not like it would suddenly disappear from your phone. Its ability to do stuff would slowly erode over time. Now, the thing, just right before we started taping, Greg, Trump apparently did an interview with CNN, not on camera, but was asked about it. He says, quote, "It ultimately goes up to me, so you're going to see what I'm going to do." Asked if he would take measures to try to reverse the pending ban, Trump said, I'll be making the decision. Congress has given me the decision, so I'll be making the decision. No, that's not what the law says. That is, now there was apparently a provision in the law that if there was a deal in place and it just took time to, dot the I's and cross the T's, then you could delay the effectiveness of this. Nothing like that is in place. Now, I can see Trump saying, give me 90 days or give me a certain amount of time to see if I can work out a deal. It's not the most unreasonable request in the law. But that's not, but the law says January 19th, this goes into effect. By the way, there are headlines saying Biden administration says that it will not enforce the TikTok ban. Yes, because they leave office the next day. This is really, this goes into effect Sunday. At noon Monday, everybody's supposed to have their desk cleaned out. So I really don't think it's fair to say, hey, why aren't you enforcing? Everybody's having their goodbye parties. So the enforcement part is on the Trump administration. It is in law. I don't think the president can look at a law passed by Congress, signed into law by a previous president, and upheld really 9-0 by the Supreme Court. I don't think you can look at it and say, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
No, I don't think so either. So if he does that, it might get challenged again. Like you said, he has some discretion on when actually things go into effect. But yes, the power of enacted legislation is binding on the executive branch. It's then your job to enforce it.
Now, if a deal comes together in the next 2 weeks, maybe the Supreme Court will say, okay, that's close enough to the deadline. We'll 50 lashes with the wet noodle. Here's a slap on the wrist. Don't do it again next time. But at this point, it doesn't sound like there's any deal in the works at all. So I don't know what the president thinks he's seeing there.
Yeah, well, we'll find out. I don't think that's number one on his agenda, but we'll see when he gets to it and how quickly this gets implemented. All right, Jim, on to our final martini, and somehow it's appropriate that in our final martini in the Biden presidency, we're talking about the diminished mental capacity of President Biden. And of course, it all came to a head last year in the debate. A little less than a month later, they successfully forced him out, they being Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, Barack Obama, the Democratic Party oligarchs who are controlling and threatening democracy, like we talked about yesterday. But new reporting, you covered it for National Review, but it's originally a New York Times story about the Democratic freakout following the debate. At the time, Biden was trying to justify staying in the race by talking about how good his polls were. And the New York Times points out that his own pollsters were giving a 5% chance of winning the election, which is probably a big reason for the freakout. Also, they talked about senators like Jack Reed, who we saw earlier this week in the Hegseth hearings, as well as his Rhode Island counterpart, Sheldon Whitehouse, always a favorite of ours, saying that they did not have confidence in Joe Biden. Jack Reed wanted multiple neurological exams to confirm that Biden was not in a diminished capacity. Whitehouse was telling people, don't take our silence as a sign of support. And I still think this is all vapors after the fact. Anybody who spent any time watching Joe Biden over the previous 3.5 years knew that this was the case. They're just pretending differently now. But what do you make of these revelations and the fact that they're coming out right now?
Now it can be told. Now, America, you can find out that all those times Democratic lawmakers told you that, God, Joe Biden is sharp as a tack and, as good as he ever was and all that stuff. Well, actually, no, they all knew that he was doddering. So we do the general gist. What is clearly happening now is now that the consequences are minimal and we're days away from Biden leaving office, they can come out and say, okay, here's what we knew. Here's what we saw. And this is clearly Schumer's side of the story of when he talked to Biden, kind of was saying, you got to hang it up. The couple details jump out. He says that if the Democratic Senate had a vote, he said to the president, you'd get 5 votes out of 50. How many do they have then?
51 at the time. Yeah.
Meaning there were 40 some who were like, Mr. President, you can't, you can't be the nominee anymore. And the other thing which kind of jumped out to me, we had seen in previous reporting by the Wall Street Journal that Joe Biden had never met with his campaign pollsters. And the campaign pollsters believed that what the memos and reports they were sending were not getting to the president, which explains why Joe Biden kept insisting he could win. And apparently, in just the last few weeks, he said, I believe if I stayed in the race, I would have beaten Donald Trump. The pollsters, according to the New York Times article, and according to Schumer, the pollsters were saying Joe Biden had a 5% chance of winning the presidency. 5. That's not I'm not missing. Now, I know there's some listeners out there who said it should be a 0.5% chance, meaning less than 1%, but a 1 in 20 chance of winning re-election against Donald Trump after the debate. Now, we knew it was bad. We didn't know it was that bad. And the intriguing thing is that Schumer said Schumer is sharing this to Biden, and Biden apparently had never heard this, which means that the pollsters are sending up reports up the chain saying, hey, it looks really bad. And people around Joe Biden are not showing him that. I don't know if that was like denial on their part. I don't know if they felt like Joe Biden couldn't handle it. I would point out, if it's that latter one, Greg, the presidency involves quite a bit of getting bad news. The presidential daily briefing that you get from the intelligence community every morning, it never says, hey, everything's great. It's never going to tell you Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, everybody's happy, everybody's singing Kumbaya. No, you're going to get bad news almost every day of your presidency. That's the job, dealing with that kind of stuff. If Biden can't handle it, he should not be it. But then the quotes that like really kind of got to me. And again, the sourcing on this is not enormously clear, but it's also kind of, pretty obvious that this is either coming from the senators themselves or from Schumer. Two Democratic senators from the Northeast who are really not a couple of our favorites, Jack Reed of Rhode Island and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, both had said, comments about Biden. Reed had said that he could no longer support Biden unless Biden could produce two neurologists to issue a public report saying he was fit to serve and then hold a news conference where anyone could ask questions. Whitehouse had told Biden's aides that the silence from the majority of Democratic senators should not be interpreted as a sign of support. It was out of respect and affection to allow Biden time to gracefully exit the race, but it would not last forever, he said, because if they continued to vouch for his fitness, they would be lying. Now, like, on the one hand, we kind of knew this. On the other hand, to see it in black and white, like a bunch of Democratic senators knew Joe Biden was not fit to serve as president of the United States. Mentally, he wasn't all there. Hey, Greg, who's president right now?
Still Joe.
Right. This is midsummer. This is like 6 months ago. So there's really, they basically go, oh my God, the president's senile. He can't do the job anymore. We'll be fine for another half a year. Like, well, why? And they're like, God, 2024, why does the electorate not trust us anymore? Well, probably because you kept lying about this. Probably because you kept, either lying by omission, by just being quiet about it. If it was like, and this is a lesson for all elderly presidents to come. If you don't have faith in that person should not be there. I've heard people making the argument, the conspiracy to cover up the fact that Joe Biden was senile and doddering and no longer capable of mentally and physically doing the duties. This is a bigger deal than Watergate. Watergate is bad, but in the end, it's a break-in at the opposition party. Like, this is the president not being able to do his job and hoping you can hide it through smoke and mirrors. So I suspect, this is the last full day of the Biden presidency that we will be talking about. But I think it's not the last time we've talked about this story. I think the revelations are just going to get worse and worse. And it's increasingly clear it's every bit as bad as we thought it was. And the Democrats knew. And they just seem to think they could hide it from everybody, even though it's pretty self-evident. And every time the president goes out there and he, what was it? Editors. They don't have editors anymore. So, Greg.
No, you're exactly right. And of course, the American public already knew that. Even before the debate, 2/3 of Americans and even a huge chunk of his own party thought he wasn't up to the job. Yes.
Yeah, this is the conspiracy. Like, we'll fool him. It didn't. And the entire, going back to the beginning of 2023, everybody thought he was too old to serve another term. All you needed to figure this out was a calendar. But there's like, Jill Biden and Ricchetti and everybody around we'll fool him. Don't worry.
Yeah, watch me. We did. That's how we knew you weren't up to the job. So,
reportedly, the last detail I did not write about in the Corner Post. So the only question Biden asked Schumer, and apparently asked him twice, is, do you think Harris can win? Which kind of indicates is that between the lines, you could say Biden thought Harris was a sure loser, which is one of the reasons why he, like that and ego were the reasons he didn't want to leave. There aren't a lot of victory laps that Joe Biden can take these days. It's really more of a victory shuffle. If his skepticism about Harris as a candidate says something. Which, by the way, why'd you pick her?
Didn't he just say a couple days ago he was confident she could have and would have won?
Well, yeah, but he was lying. So
of course, So the two things he did, he wasn't sure she could win, yet he basically cleared the field for her by endorsing her half an hour after he resigned. And the other thing, of course, he did is he got the oligarchs, if we're going to call them that, to agree to let him to stay on. So basically, he's like, I'm not leaving. Okay, I'm leaving, but I'm not resigning. Okay, fine. Whatever, Joe. Just get out of this race.
And the oligarchs clearly were fine with using the White House as a retirement home. That's great. Let's get a seat by the window so you can watch the squirrels. But just didn't anybody ever think how this might not be the best for the country? But the other point, when he says, there's no way Harris could have won, or privately thinking Harris couldn't win, publicly insisting she could. Look, over time, as we get further from November, it just kind of looks clear cake was baked in 2023. That you look back, the country was really unhappy with the direction of it. Yes, Harris was a less than ideal candidate of change, but I don't think Shapiro, Jared Polis. There was no combination of lawmakers, Ossoff or anything like that. There was no two Democrats who were going to go out there and win. In these circumstances, I think. With
Biden's record hanging over him.
Yeah. They would have had to run as explicit critics of Biden, and I just don't think they could have done that. So,
well, we still got a couple days left of the Biden administration. I'm sure we'll get a whole pile of horrible pardons on the way out the door. But again, on Monday, although Jim will not be here on Monday, it's a holiday weekend as well, and we will have a 3-martini lunch. By the time you actually hear this podcast on Monday, Donald J. Trump will be president again. So, Jim, amazing. I will see you on Tuesday.
Greg, I'll see you in the second term.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, not only on your favorite podcast platform, but also on YouTube. Big stuff going to be happening there soon. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3-Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific weekend and join us again on Monday for the next 3-Martini Lunch.